Hello, my beautiful book lovers. My name is Kimia, and welcome to not my book nook, but my Christmas tree. So today we are finally doing a video that I have been waiting for it ever since like the beginning of the year, because like by the time that I was planning what sort of videos I would really like, birthday videos of some sort were always like one of the ideas that I was really excited about. And this one in particular was one that I was super excited about, and I cannot believe it that it's finally here. We're finally going to do it, and that is to celebrate my main girl, Jane Austen. Please, a round of applause for her birthday, because like she is honestly one of the greatest authors that have ever existed. She changed the literature world so much with her wit, with her ideas, with her comments about the society that she was living in, with everything that she was pointing out that like was expected at the time of women, of even men, of the society in general. So anyway, she has been always one of my favorite. And so today is her birthday, and I just want to wish her, wherever she is, one of the biggest, happiest birthday ever, because she changed my life so much, similar to a lot of other people that grew up reading Jane Austen or have been watching movies, shows or whatnot that were based off Jane Austen books, or were sort of a retelling, or like the person that wrote them sort of got inspired by Jane Austen herself. And so anyway, she's the best. She truly is. And so for today's video, I thought to do it a little bit different than the other birthday videos that I have done. And what we're going to do, we're going to start with a little tiny introduction about Jane Austen. And then after that, I decided to pick similar books to her work and sort of recommend books. If you like this Jane Austen book, you would like this other one. And I picked everything that sort of match her tone, the tone of like the book, the subject of the book, the context of the book, and also they're all written by women, which it was like one of the things that I was very excited. Anyway, let's get into it. First, to sort of get a little summary of Jane Austen. Jane Austen was born in December 16, 1775, and she was born in England, and she was living in a very close family. She and her sisters, they had a very close relationship. They were close with their parents. They were not really wealthy, and because of that, it was very hard at the moment for all of them, especially for Jane, simply because back then, if you were a woman, if you didn't have a rich husband, you were really doomed, or at least like a very rich father, because like most of the time, the little amount of like land or money that the father had would go to the next male person in the family. It could be like if he had a brother, would go to the brother. If not, it will be like to some sort of cousin or uncle or whatnot. And so because of that, it was sort of hard for them to figure out that situation. And Jane, she being such a reader, she was very creative, and she loved to write and read. And so she started to write novels, and then eventually she started to publish, and they were not really expecting to be as big, simply because, like, you know, to a lot of people back then, that was like, you know, it's going to be like some silly sort of novel by a woman who's going to read it or whatnot. And then all of a sudden she was really this sort of a big author. And like, it wasn't that she got super famous, super rich or any of that, but she was able to sort of support herself and like her sister and like sort of situation. And so she just started writing, and because of the situation that she was, that as the woman that was coming from a sort of like a middle to lower class-ish family that was expected to marry and marry wealthy, she started to use that and her own struggles and her sort of own life to write stories, to make comments about all of these things and how women were expected to marry rich. And also because it was so hard, because like, you know, a lot of the times, not even back then only, but even to this day, like there's that thing with the class that like a lot of time rich people marry rich, you know, and so it wasn't that easy. And so for her, she started to, instead of have this cynical sort of a look at her situation and her life, she started to write books about love that will give the heroine this great love with a very handsome, rich man. And that was like not the only purpose of her books, but like that was sort of like a happy ending that she wanted it for all of her characters, her female characters. And so that was sort of like a little summary of Jane Austen and her life. And I have read almost all of her books because obviously, and I love them all. I do love some a little bit more than some other, but that's not the case today. Like, that's not what we're going to talk about. So let's get into them, shall we? So first, we're going to start with the classic, obviously. I mean, all of them are classic, honestly, but like the most well-known of them all, it's Pride and Prejudice. So as you know, Pride and Prejudice, it's about Mr. Darcy, who is this very rich man that it's a little bit not nice. He gave this sense of that he's very prejudiced about the fact that, like, you know, he's like very rich, and so he thinks, or people think that he thinks that he's like much better than them, and like doesn't really like to be around all of these like low income families and what sort. And on the other hand, we have Elizabeth, which she is this very fierce, lovely woman that she loves to read. She, unlike a lot of her sisters and other like females around her, she's not really about marriage. Not that she has anything against it, but it's that like it's not what she is. She sees it as her own and only purpose. And so she's like really like trying to find love in a sense. It's not all about like marriage for benefit and like, you know, for the money and all of that. So we have these two lovely characters, and they meet and they don't like each other because, like, you know, again, like Elizabeth also thinks that Darcy is so very much arrogant, and like he doesn't have the doesn't give out the right vibe. And at the other side, Mr. Darcy thinks that, like, you know, Elizabeth, and especially like some of her sisters and like, you know, the family, it's sort of like too much sometimes in a sense. And so the story, it's about their love, it's about their romance, they're about realizing that how things are not always the way that we think they are, that we should not always judge people based on like some incidents that might happen because of whatever, and like maybe the person isn't just not having a good day and things of that sort, and also maybe because a family is not like very rich and like, you know, from like high levels of like very well educated or whatnot sort of family, that does not mean that, like, you know, they're all like bad or whatnot. So anyway, that's the main story of Pride and Prejudice. And the story, it's fun because Jane Austen, again, she's super witty, and you see that through Elizabeth, because like Elizabeth is sort of based on Jane Austen herself. So if you love and adore Pride and Prejudice as much as I do, you should read North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. So this lovely book, it's similar in a sense that we have Margaret, that she's a person that it's coming from a family that was mostly like living in a sort of a farmland area, and her father was a priest. And so that's sort of like a family and life that they had. And then because her father is sort of like changing his job, and like because of his job, they're moving to the north area of England. And this book, it's happening during like 19th century, and by the time that the Industrial Revolution was happening. And so on the North Shore, a lot of these like big factories were starting to work, a lot of like mills workers. And so this story, it's really focusing on Margaret and her sort of like transformation from a life that was so much simpler and easier, well, in some sense, and also like it was like a more of a like a lower income, middle income of a household. Now she's in a society and it's in the like the area that it's all about money. It's about like the Industrial Revolution. By the time that it happened, it really changed the dynamic of class in not only Britain, but around Europe and then later on around the world. But the focus is really about Britain and how during that time, we had all of these people that were working in the factories and the mills and how horrible their life conditions were. And on the other hand, we have this very wealthy sort of society that they are making so much profit out of the hard work of all of these people, which sounds very familiar to these days. But anyway, so the story, it's about Margaret, and she is sort of trying to understand and navigate her life through all of these changes, and she meets people from different sort of class, and it's very interesting for her to sort of see how the life is different from South that she like was used to, and now that she's here. And at the same time, she meets John, who is a like a mill owner, and so he belongs to like an upper class. And so their relationship, it's very interesting to see that how two people similar to Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth that are from different classes, how they come together and they try to realize that how all of those differences can be beneficial for their relationship, to improve themselves, to like, you know, change for better, and how it affects them also at the same time in different areas because of like how they were raised and how they're living and all of that. So if you like a book similar to Pride and Prejudice that really is focusing, other than the romance, on the class and class differences and how all of these sort of aspect of our everyday lives can make life so hard or easy depending on where you are, and also how it's through different lenses, like just one life can be seen so differently. So anyway, it's a great book. I enjoyed it very much. Again, it has all of the same tones. By the time that you're reading this book, you're not going to feel like, oh, this is just like another retelling, because it's different enough to not give you the vibe of it's a different retelling. But if you like Pride and Prejudice, it's close enough that if you enjoy that one, you're going to enjoy this one as well. Next, we have Sense and Sensibility. So this book, it's about two sisters that they just recently lost their father, and because of that, they're facing a lot of hardship because, again, as we mentioned, in 19th century, and even like way before that, women did not have any sort of rights to their, like, you know, to their money. They didn't have a right to work, so they couldn't really, I mean, they could do some sort of works, like some very specific works, but that was not really for women who were from a little bit of like upper class or like middle class-ish. And so it was very hard for women to have money, to gain money, to be able to have sort of a financial freedom and live. And so the story, it's about Eleanor and Marianne and these sisters. They're living with their mother and a younger sister. And the story, it's really following them, trying to see that how, when it comes to life, and when it comes especially to even love, you cannot always be too emotional or too rational. The life, it's really about that balance. It's about how you make sense of things without being too overthinking it, or being without too emotional and just like jumping to conclusion, jumping to actions and doing things that it's just like gonna have a lot of consequences and like, you know, end up like just not worthing it. And so if you enjoyed Sense and Sensibility, I will highly recommend to read Middlemarch by George Eliot. And you might ask yourself, George Eliot, that's a guy, and I thought that these were all women. That is because she is. George Eliot is sort of like an author's name for Marian Evans. And so in this book, it really looks at that dilemma as well. The book, it's about Dorothy, and it's about her life and how, as a woman, she was in a society that was very much about tradition, but at the same time, because of like, in like 19th century, late 19th century, early 20th, a lot of changes were happening in the society and a lot of things were changing. And so there was this conflict that how a lot of people were trying to hang on to all of those tradition, not changing them, and like stick to them and just continue living with those, while at the same time, because of a lot of changes that was happening to the society, there was a push for the change. And as a woman, Dorothy is dealing and sort of fighting with all of these expectations of a woman. And the book, it's really looking at that so beautifully, because like there is this like Middlemarch is this like fictional sort of a town that Dorothy lives in, and we are sort of following her and also a lot of other characters from this city. And we're looking at how the consequences of the actions of all of these characters not only affect them, but also affect the society in general. And it's also because it's looking at how it's, when it comes to a community, this one being like a small town, it could never be only about the individual. And the community itself has so much effect on the individual, and the individual can make so much changes to the community. And so it's such a great and lovely book, because you are seeing all of these struggles that are happening because of all of those expectations. And you're also seeing it that how you have to be rational, but also have empathy for others, for yourselves, to how to make better decisions. And so I highly recommend this book. It's honestly one of the greatest books that I have ever read. And it has all of those senses that it has with Sense and Sensibility. And so if you like this, read that. Moving on, we're having another favorites of mine. Again, all of them are my favorites, honestly. But now we're moving to Emma. And Emma is just really, it's, well, I don't want to say the funnest, but it is sort of the funnest one. So Emma, it's about Emma. And she is a woman that, unlike most of the characters of Jane Austen books, she's actually coming from a family that, they're doing pretty well. They are not really in a position that Emma needs to worry about getting married and getting like a rich husband as soon as she can. Again, there are those expectations, because at the end of the day she's a woman, but that's not her main concern. And instead, what she starts to do, she loves to matchmake, and like she's pretty good at it actually. Like she has been successful, at least through like some cases that had happened. And so because of that, she really focused on that, and she really is enjoying it as sort of a hobby. And through this story, we're following her, and we're seeing that how sometimes you might think that you're doing a good thing, right? Like your intentions are good, you really want something good for the person that you're trying to help. But at the end of the day, sometimes good intentions are not gonna end up with good results, and we might end up even harming the other person. And so that's like the main sort of the focus of Emma. And so if you have enjoyed Emma, I highly recommend reading The Grand Sophie by Georgetta Heyer, I believe so. Georgetta, I think. My apologies. I put the book here. So this book, similarly, it's about Sophie, and she's finally coming back to London after like a few years of traveling with her father, who is a diplomat. And so now she's coming back, and she's going to live with her family, and they're very conservative. And so and they're also not very rich per se. They're like, like a mid to high-ish class of a family-ish. And so she is a very young, funny, and also a very smart sort of a girl. And what she ended up doing is that by the time that she's coming to this family of hers, she wants to help. And what she starts to do is she starts meddling a lot about their lives, their personal lives, their love lives. And through all of these meddling, she gets into a lot of troubles. And then also we have all of these different like family members, the aunt, the cousins, that are going through different things. And again, because this is a very traditional sort of a family, they have a very special and specific expectation from Sophie. And so those are creating all of those other conflicts. And so I very much enjoy these two books together because Sophie and Emma, they are very similar in a sense that they're very headstrong, but at the same time, they are smart and compassionate enough to realize if they have made a mistake, to really go out of their way and apologize for it, try to fix it, try to improve. And so they're very lovable characters because, you know, like again, like their intentions are good. They're never trying to like plot against others. And so you're seeing all of that, and you're also, again, with all of these books, I don't need to repeat myself, that they are really sort of making all of these commentaries about the society back then, about that, what was expected, not only from women, but also men, and from the different classes, and like, you know, how like each class should sort of stay on their own, in their own lane. And so it's a very fun book. This one is like a very funny, it's sort of like a rom-com. It really is, because Emma is also like such a rom-com. And the new version, the movie that came out, I think it was like, oh my god, 2-3 years ago, 3 maybe, which is like the greatest Emma version ever. I just love it. It's so fun to watch, that it's really like these two books are like a rom-com. And if you're ever in the mood to read a romance book that it's like very lighthearted, but at the same time make you to question, make you to appreciate some changes, make you to realize some stuff hasn't changed really, it's really a fun read for that. Next, we have sort of a different book in a sense, and that is Northanger Abbey, which this one, it doesn't have a gothic tone, but it does have a gothic theme to it, let's say. So this book, it's actually Jane Austen attempt to not to write a gothic book per se, but to use some elements and themes of gothic in her character background or story, in a sense. So the story, it's about Catherine, and Catherine loves gothic books. She loves and adores them, and she reads a lot. And she always wishes to sort of experience those gothic stories, you know, all of those castles and like the ghost, or like, I don't know, like some sort of spirit or something that's happening with most of the gothic books. And so she lives for that. She really wants that. And then eventually she is sort of visiting Bath, the city of Bath. And while she's there, she's invited to go and visit this sort of like castle, and this family that lives in sort of a castle-ish. And she is like losing her mind. She's so immersed in this sort of love for gothic stories that she starts to not exactly imagine, but sort of hope and create this sort of gothic story. And especially because it's the castle that she's visiting, it's sort of feeding her all of those vibes that she wants. And so she starts to sort of feel that maybe things are not the way that they seem, and there are like some stuff that going on that they are like a little bit iffy. And so she is like all for it. And then she realized that like life and books are super different, which is super funny because this being a book itself. And it's like a very fascinating book. I love it. And like it shows how well read Jane Austen herself was, because like she was again able to use those gothic elements to add to what Catherine wanted it without, because again, her story is not really gothic. You cannot call it a gothic book, but has enough element for Catherine's imagination to be able to give that to her so that like the story can go on. So anyway, it's such a great book. And for this one, I was like, you know what? Let's go with a Gothic book. And I was thinking of Jane Eyre, but then I was like, Jane Eyre, it's like up there. I love it so much. And it's such a great book, but I have talked about it before in another video, and so I thought for this one I'm going with another favorites of mine that's again great, and that is Wuthering Height by Emily Bronte, which is related to Jane Eyre because it's like done by Charlotte Bronte's sister Emily. And so Wuthering Height, it's full-on Gothic, this one. So the story begins with Mr. Lockwood. He is going to stay in this sort of state, and the person that's sort of like responsible, like, for the state, it's Heathcliff. And through different events, Mr. Lockwood sort of gets into all of the stories and events and mess that is happening around Heathcliff and like that entire state and all of that. And so this story follows Heathcliff's love and passion and obsession with Catherine, who has passed away, and they were like very good friends when they were like very young. But then Catherine being from like a very sort of well-off family, and Heathcliff being adopted, like he was a orphan kid. They sort of adopted him to like take care of like the estate and all of that. They were very against it, obviously. And so the story follows that love, and also how love can turn to obsession. That obsession can have so much negative energy with it, and how many conflict it can create. And so the Wuthering Height, it's one of the greatest books that I have ever read, honestly, and I'm saying that about like almost all of these books because they're all great. And that's a reason they're in this list, because if you have a great book, you have to recommend another great book. That's just the math. And so Wuthering Height, honestly, but when it comes to Gothic, the Bronte sister are just the master. And Wuthering Height is really that, because like when you're reading this story and you're following all of these different characters, that they're all sort of related and like they're connected, their stories get tangled into one another, and you have this sort of Gothic background and like the estate that everything is happening. Like it's very well done how it creates this imagery for you to sort of imagine all of those places, the events, and these characters also, that how like everything is happening. It's so well done, and it's such a great Gothic book that I'm pretty sure if Catherine from Northanger Abbey would have read Wuthering Height, because like it came like around 30 years afterwards, if she would have read it, she would have loved it, because like honestly it's like Gothic at its best. And so if you love this, then you have to read this. Then we have Mansfield Park. And you know how I said I love almost all Jane Austen books? Well, Mansfield Park, it's not there because of the characters. Because I enjoyed Mansfield Park a lot while I was reading it, and focusing on other elements that Jane Austen always she did them so well that you cannot not enjoy them, right? But some aspect of that book was just driving me crazy, and I was so sad about that, because again, I love and adore Jane Austen and all of her books, but like Mansfield Park is just, I couldn't, and I tried. And the thing is, like, that's actually one of the longest book. It is it is the longest book of hers, and I was so sad that out of all of those books that could have been that long, Mansfield Park ended up being the longest. And I was just, So Mansfield Park, it's about Fanny. And she comes from a very poor family. And because she's so poor, she ends up going to live with sort of her family members, like some other family members, some aunt and uncles that they are like far richer, and so they sort of like try to provide and like take care of Fanny to help her family, you know, like to have like less children to take care of. And so while she's there, she moves there from like a very young age, and they grow up and they're reaching to the age that, you know, it's you're looking for a love, you're looking to get married, and all of these sort of things just adds to your life, right? Like it's now part of your life. And so those parts, great. I was enjoying it, very lovely, perfect. Then when we reached the part that Fanny started to have this crush on Edmund. And the thing is, like, from even by the time that she moves to this house, Edmund was the nicest. He was the kindest. He really took care of Fanny. He really was there for her. And so it was like all very sweet and lovely. And so by the time that Fanny is like a young girl, she started to have different sort of feeling for Edmund. But Edmund is always very much seeing Fanny as a sister, which, remember that, right? And so that's like the vibe and everything, and there comes other characters that are add to the story, and the main focus of Mansfield Park, the theme, it's really about morality, right? It's about how we as an individual and also as a society are dealing with these issues about, again, when it comes back to tradition and progress. And so it's really dealing with that, and it's trying to show that through different characters, that some of them, Fanny being the first and main one, and then also Edmund, not exactly, but sort of is trying to be those characters that are really standing up for those morals, right? And then we have the Crawfords, if I'm not wrong. We have Henry and Mary. That these two characters, they are sort of the opposite of that, you know? They are like the characters that portraying all of these like new sort of changes that is happening, and they're not really standing up, or they're not really following those tradition anymore, right? And so that's okay. That's totally fine. And I understand, please forgive me if I'm going on a rant about Mansfield Park, but I just needed to get out of my chest. Like for every other book, it was just more of a summary and you will see it. But this one, I need to talk about it, and this is the time for it. So, so Edmund started to get involved and started having feelings for Mary, right? And remember that Edmund is the person that, he's the main character that is really pushing to do the right thing, to really, you know, be like a right person, you know, to never sell yourself for anything, you know, to just really, really be the white sort of a character. And then Mary, she's the character that it's not for any of that. But she is such a good diplomat that she knows how to play Edmund, right? She knows how to portray herself as a person that can be okay with tradition, go back to it, sort of follow it and be okay with it, but at the same time push for some changes and like, you know, to really go to the right direction towards forward, you know? And so Edmund is obsessed with her, and he is like all for that. But then when Fanny, who is in love and really obsessed with Edmund, starts to realize that he's not seeing her really like that and he's seeing her as a sister, she starts to develop sort of a feeling for Henry. In a sense, a little bit, but Henry is really into Fanny. He's like really like flirting with her and really pursuing her. But Henry, again, being like the other character, he's not following all of those morals. Edmund, it's so against it, and is constantly telling Fanny off for like being interested or being like friendly even to Henry. And that's my main issue. Edmund is such a hypocrite in this entire book. And like, he goes all out for Mary and he wants to marry her. He doesn't care what Fanny says or like what others thinks. And like, you know, like everybody else sort of standing outside are seeing that like Mary is not the person that she is. And like, she's not as good as Edmund thinks she is. And all of that, he doesn't listen. He's like in love. He wants to do it. But at the same time, when it comes to Fanny and Henry, he's just like not for it. He hates it. And he's like, you know, like he's keep telling Fanny that like, you know, like you're doing the wrong thing. I was expecting better from you. And like, you know, you were not like this and all of that. And then eventually when things like sort of tables turns and things changes, Edmund all of a sudden realized that like, oh yeah, everybody were right. And oh, like Fanny, who has been here my entire life and I've been looking at her as a sister and I've been saying that, all of a sudden I'm in love with her and I'm going to get married. So like, you see, I couldn't. I really tried, but I couldn't just deal with that book because I was so mad. And Edmund is the only main character, like especially like the male main character, that I did not like a bit in any of Jane Austen books. Anyway, now that that's just out and I'm like ready to move on. If you liked Mansfield Park, which I'm sorry if I didn't really like that, again, I don't hate that book because, again, it has all of those elements of Jane Austen writing that really makes it worth to at least read it one time. And a lot of people love it, which is great. Honestly, I just didn't like Edmund. That was like my main issue. If he wasn't in that book, I would have enjoyed that. I really wanted Fanny to marry Henry. So like, you know, like sometimes I was like, I could see him to sort of like, you know, become a better person for her. So, but if you liked Mansfield Park, or if you also didn't like Mansfield Park as much, this other book, it's a must read to sort of fix the issue with the character of this book for you. And that is The Custom of the Country by Edith Wharton. So this book, it's about Undine. And she is a person that it's coming from sort of like a middle class family. And she marries, she has a kid. And then as she gets into the society and she sees the upper class, she starts to feel that as a woman who, again, cannot really work, have her own money or anything, the only way for her to move up the ladder is by connections and marriage. So she ends up to getting a divorce, leaving her husband and her child to marry another man, you know, to move up and just keep doing that, trying to make all of the right connections to become richer and more well-connected and just going up. And this book, it's looking at, again, going back to that morality and the question of morality. And it's also looking at how in the 20th century, late 20th century, everything was about a materialistic sort of a life, lifestyle. And I love that book so much because it just does it very well, because it has this main character, right? That she is not really the person that it's doing the right things. But at the same time, while you're going through the story and you're looking at it from her point of view, at the situation that she is, you can sort of see and understand that she is the product of her own society, right? A society that is all about money and about connections. And when she's a woman, that she cannot go and become rich by her work or investment or such things. She is left with this one option, that because she really wants to become rich and that well connected, she is using it to get married constantly. And it reached a point that you see that she's not realizing that how her actions are affecting others, And it goes also back to that sense of individuality and community, that how both are connected and affect one another. And so this is a book that has all of the theme that Mansfield Park was about, which again, the theme in Mansfield Park was great and it was doing it right. The only issue was the characters, or character really, and this one, at least for me, didn't have that, and so I was able to really enjoy it even more. And again, the characters are very lovely, and you're seeing and following all of these sort of events and these things that are happening, that you have the character, and that's like what I love. And a lot of people, like, you know how like we all, or mostly, love a good like morally gray sort of a character. That's the thing here, that like we have this character that we don't agree with what she's doing to others, but at the same time you can see a bit of why she is doing it, and that for me is like really the winner there. And so anyway, this was super long. So if you like Mansfield Park, read The Custom of the Country. And last but not least, I saved my all-time favorite, because again, I love them all, but you know how like there's one that you like a little teensy weensy more, and one that you like a little teensy weensy less. So that was Mansfield Park, and since that one is out, I wanted to end the video with my favorite, and that one is Persuasion. Persuasion was the book that by the time that I read it, I was so in love with it and so in shock that I was never expecting that a book other than Pride and Prejudice become my favorite. And the thing is, like, actually Persuasion, I think it was the last book that I read, if I'm not wrong, while I was like reading and like, because like I read Pride and Prejudice much younger, and then I didn't read for a while, and then I think the next one was Emma, if I'm not wrong, that I read, and then like through the years I started to read like some other, and then eventually I read Persuasion, and I don't know why I waited so long, but like, you know, it was like one of her last works. I think it's the last work that was published and done. And so by the time that I finished it, I loved it so much that it's like my all-time favorite. And so Persuasion, it's about Anne. And Anne was a young girl that was in love with Frederick Wentworth. And they were both in love, and they wanted to get married and like, you know, live happily ever after. But because of the society, because of her family, because of people talking, they were like, you know, Frederick doesn't have anything, he's not successful, like, you're not gonna live a happy life with him, so you should say no. And Anne, being a young girl and being a woman, she was really not having that much of a choice in the say, so she ended up refused Frederick's proposal. So he lives, she lives, they're living their lives, years passed, and then eventually they come back together because of some events, and now they are much older and much more mature, and Anne has realized what a mistake she has made, because like, you know, she listened to others, and just because like, you know, what was expected from her, what was people saying, and all of those things, she did something that now she's regretting. But Frederick, now he's like a captain, he's doing very well, and like, you know, he's very successful. And Anne feels that like, you know, Frederick doesn't want her anymore, because like, you know, like she refused him and he was very heartbroken. So she's like, you know what, even if it was me, I wouldn't want him to get back with me ever again, because like, you know, why? And so, but at the same time, like, Anne really still, like, by the time that she sees Frederick, all of those feelings are coming back and rushing towards her. And so she's, like, having this dilemma, and she doesn't know what to do about it. And so the story, it's really focusing on how the society expectation of us can really ruin our lives sometimes, and how listening to others, it's not always beneficial for us, no matter who they are. They're like, you know, for her case was like they were like family and friends, that they wanted the best for her. Again, like similar to like Emma, the intentions were good. They just wanted her to marry like, you know, rich, so she can live like a life that she doesn't need to struggle. But the result was wrong, because they didn't care, they didn't pay attention to the fact that the love that was there, and also they were young, they could have made a life for themselves, as we see later on by the time that Frederick goes and come back as a captain and he's doing well. And so it's really about that, and it's really focusing on that, and it's really focusing on the importance of not to always put yourself first, but also sometimes you need to pursue what you really love and desire, and if it's not going, you know, to harm anyone, and like, you know, it's like a right, good way. And so if you love and enjoy Persuasion as much as I did, the book that I'm going to suggest, it's Blue Castle by L.M. Montgomery. And so Miss Montgomery, she's well known by Anne of Green Gables, which is one of my favorite series of my entire life. So this book, it's not as well known, but it's as great as Anne of Green Gables, and it's different in a sense that, again, like, well, it's mature, similar to like the last couple of books of the series of Anne of Green Gables by the time that, like, you know, she's an adult. And so this book, it's about Valency, and she, again, it's a young girl that, because of her family, the society expectation, and everything that's going on around her, she is living a life that she's just not enjoying. She's very miserable because, like, she's doing everything that she's being told, right? And then eventually, because of some events, she gets this chance to move and go to a place on her own and sort of start a new life of a sort. And that place is the Blue Castle. And so we are following her through this journey of discovering herself and what she wants and how to get them and go for them. And in this sort of a new environment that she is in Blue Castle, she meets all of these different characters that, again, some of them are very lovely and like they're trying to help. Some of them are those people that, again, like, you know, people talk. And she meets this other character, Barney, and he has this whole reputation, right? But they sort of form a friendship. And again, because of the reputation that Barney has, and because of the society, especially back there, and people talking and all of that, there's all of these things going on, but she's trying to really go for what she wants this time, and, like, you know, not follow what people are telling her to do, and, like, you know, to really find herself as a person. And that's what I love about this book, because similar to Anne in Persuasion, there are two people that they realize eventually that, you know, no matter what you do, how much you do it, you will never ever be able to please everyone. And as much as, like, you want to do that, you will just never achieve it. And the more that you do it, you're going to be the miserable one, because, like, it's not gonna work, right? And so both of these characters, they realize that, and they start to change, to push for what they want, to get what they desire. And it's a great book. So if you love and enjoyed Persuasion, I highly, highly, highly recommend to read The Blue Castle. And by that being said, this was a little bit of a longer of a video. I hope that you enjoy it and you're not bored or tired. And let me know which of these books from each category, either the recommendations or Jane Austen books, are your favorite. But most important of them all, which I really want to know, is that throughout all of these years, a lot of movies and shows has been created based on Jane Austen books, right? And since it's her birthday, we should read her books, but we can also, if we don't have the time, not in the mood, whatever that it is, it's a Saturday, we should watch one of the movies that is based on her books. And I want to know that if you want to watch a movie tonight, what is going to be? Because for me, it's going to be a tie between Emma, that came out, I think 2020 or 21, or, which probably will be the one, that is Pride and Prejudice, that came in 2005. That is my favorite. I just love it so much. And I have seen it so many times, but I'm going to watch it tonight too. So let me know which movie or show even you're going to watch tonight. And I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and would like to get recommendations similar to these books. Till the next video, happy reading!